So I just want to show what a map of next year would look like. Basically, it's an updated version of what last week's was. A couple cap holds that are a little different as well. The Mitchell Robinson and Ryan Arcidiacono ones. Farron Hunt as.
Can I ask you something? I'm sorry.
Yes.
The Mitchell Robinson cap hold. Bobby had it as at 1.8. The CBA says something different. The CBA says it's 190% of the current amount.
It's not. It's because it's not a rookie contract. Because
I know it's not.
Exception. But then
you keep talking. I'm going to look this up.
It's the second year veteran minimum. That's what the value would be.
The second.
So
okay.
That's why it's one.
I mean, again, Marks had it, so I assume Marks is right. But it's a different reading of the CBA than I had.
It was 1.7 or so beforehand when the CBA wasn't expected to climb as far as it did. And the number changed and I forgot to reflect that. But again, so here's Julius Randle, $23.76 million. And if you look over now at the max room, it seems that the Knicks can actually enter the offseason with $2.6 million, $2.62, I guess, $1 million in cap space. And that's not necessarily the position they want to be in because, again, there's no spending ability. You'd have to clear more salary, which they can do. But it's reliant on them to clear more salary in order for that to increase. But they can enter the offseason as an over the cap team if they want to. So that's just what it looks like.
Okay. I still disagree with this. It says right here, 190% of his previous salary, Larry Bird, not coming off rookie scale contract below the average salary. I
understand, but I've talked with someone who is like in the know with this. I worked through it. Okay. I'm just telling you.
All right. Listen, I'll take your word for it. I'll take Bobby Marks' word for it. I'll take your word for it. It's not what the words on the page are.
Offline, we can walk through it.
We will do that.
Perfect. So this is what I have kind of determined as acceptable return in a Randle trade. And I'm talking strictly about like the salaries itself and the terms of what comes back. So the first option is little to no salary in return. If the Knicks basically dumped Julius Randle as part of a 2-team or a 3-team or however many team deal you want, where the Knicks are sending Julius Randle's salary out and getting little to nothing in return. Knicks could go with two approaches. Number one, they could try to operate as a below the cap team, renounce the traded player exception that they would generate by dumping Julius Randle and create cap space, or they could stay above the salary cap or, go as an above the cap team, keep the traded player exception, and then work on a sign and trade or trade a player into that traded player exception. Either way, it's like that's acceptable, right? If the Knicks want to kind of navigate in that manner, that's something that works perfectly.
This is the Dallas is not playing nicely in the sandbox, even though Jalen Brunson has made his feelings known that he wants to come to the Knicks scenario.
Yes. And more on that later.
Okay.
But yes. Then there's the idea of matching non-expiring salary, right? So it's a contract that doesn't expire in 2023. The Knicks could still operate as an above the cap team in 2022. Then it's the matching expiring salary, but it's for a player that's actually good. So like, I don't know, a Jeremy Grant type player. For example, if the Knicks wanted to trade for Jeremy Grant and they used Julius Randle as outgoing, Jeremy Grant is an unrestricted free agent in 2023, but the Knicks could always basically take Jeremy Grant's salary and extend him for whatever contract they wanted. It could be
for a max contract, the max he gets signed for.
Right. But it's right. And to clarify, it's not a max contract. Yeah. It's like a Julius max contract of what they can do. So that's financially speaking, contract speaking, that's what would be acceptable. What would be unacceptable in my mind is number one, bad expiring salary. So like, unless the front office believes that they can flip an expiring contract that they don't want to extend for a player who doesn't have expiring salary, that's a good way to go about it. But it has to then be a two-step process. It's a little bit more challenging. It's more pressure on the Knicks to get a deal done. Then there's a player who isn't starting caliber. So like, we can talk about all of Julius Randle's flaws. At the end of the day, he's a starting player. He deserves to be a starter. Yes, he's high usage. He's inefficient, not great around the rim. All these things we could throw out there. He's a starter. And if you're the Knicks, you should be expecting a starter in return, or at least someone who's starting caliber. Yes.
Just an asterisk to that, unless they got some kind of draft equity of significance with the non-starting caliber player.
Yes, but also I don't think that happens so frequently where it's like that's a very plausible premise. It could happen.
I know. I agree. I agree with you. We did this last week a little bit. I agree with you. I wanted, because there are people out there who are like, if you could get that deal, get that deal. I'm not saying, we're not saying we don't like that deal in theory. It's just the likelihood of it being out there is probably not very high.
Right. And then the player who will block Obi Toppin. Again, I believe if you're trading Julius Randle, you should start Obi Toppin, which is why using Jeremy Grant as an example isn't necessarily the best bet, because you'd have to probably shift RJ Barrett to the 2. And then what are you doing with Evan Fournier? And how does the fit with Grant and RJ and Obi work? And all sorts of things. So like from a contractual standpoint, it makes sense with Jeremy Grant. But then maybe from a positional standpoint, it's just a lot more cluttered, especially now that you have Cam Reddish.
This is like the Harrison Barnes thing too, which is like Julius is a straight 4. Harrison's more of a 3-4, but like realistically, are they going to use him in that capacity? But then again, if we're talking about whatever, we don't have to get into Harrison Barnes too much, but like there are gray areas here. The only other thing I just, again, to put a point on it for anybody is like, well, why wouldn't we want bad expiring salary? This is probably, again, if you missed last week's episode, as Jeremy pointed out, the way the Knicks are set up cap wise for the foreseeable future, there's no plan here to operate as a team that is under the salary cap, or at least with any significance. So
certainly not moving forward, and ideally not this year. But It's funny you mentioned that, John, because of course I'm going to mention it. I'm going to bring it up as well. So here's an example, right? Let's say the Knicks decided to go off of a cliff and they did Randle and Nerlens Noel and Kemba Walker and got Russell Westbrook back. I'm not endorsing this. I'm just saying as a pure example for what happens, right? Like you could then have something like this where, sure, you have Russell Westbrook's contract coming off the books. It's a $49 million cap hold. And that seems like, hey, we've got all this money to spend. Well, you also might want to exercise the team options for Alec Burks and Derrick Rose. And then you've got Cam Reddish's cap hold still on the books and RJ Barrett's cap hold. And this isn't even accounting for the 2 first-round picks that the Knicks are supposed to have. And this is also saying, Mitchell Robinson, I just threw out a random number. I said $12.5 million. Don't read into it. It's just really just for math. But you're over the salary cap. You don't even have money to work with. And now you're only 3 salaries that you have at your disposal, assuming they don't get traded between then: Evan Fournier, Derrick Rose, Alec Burks. So it's not great. But what if the Knicks didn't go about this way? And in what I mean by that is, what if they still did the same trade, got Russell Westbrook or that type of player, and then they just declined Derrick Rose and Alec Burks, and then they could open up cap space that way? They could do it. It's definitely possible. We're looking at $30 million practically without, again, considering the first round picks that are there. Few things. Number one, you're really not going to have many unrestricted free agent stars likely on the market. I fully expect Nikola Jokic to sign a Supermax and stay in Denver.
Why are you being kind? There's nobody that's going to be on the market in 2023.
Right. But I'm just
but this notion that there are these stars, like we dance
that's why
around.
I'm trying to dispel it.
Yeah. We dance around this issue. Yeah. Free agency is gone. It's gone. It went bye-bye.
It's dormant. Yes.
It doesn't exist in the NBA anymore.
Well,
like these things, it does, but it not in the sense that it used to exist, right, where you're saving up your cap space and you're making a big run at player X, player Y. It doesn't happen.
Right. And we can just remove Bradley Beal from the situation. And then if you're talking about, Zion Williamson's a restricted free agent. Okay. Well, how many times does Zion Williamson or a restricted free agent star just walk to another team for cap space, especially one that's deserving of however much they will command? And then the other team's like, cool, we'll just let you go. It doesn't happen. And if that player figures out a way to somehow force himself elsewhere, well, then you're going to want to probably send matching salary back too. And if you have lost it by trying to create cap space, it doesn't help you. Because as you can see right now, it's like RJ Barrett, I gave him less than the cap hold, and same thing with Cam Reddish. Even if you did that, you're still running into the issue. Like, we have no choice but to trade Evan Fournier and probably Obi Toppin and then some other things. Although Zion's a weird situation because then our best friend base year compensation comes into play. Bottom line here is it's just like it doesn't make sense to go as an under the cap team in 2023. It makes more sense this year, but it still doesn't make a lot of sense to do it, in my opinion.
You know who's going to be the best if he doesn't extend, which I think he probably will extend? I was going to say the best free agent on the market, realistically, that's actually going to hit the market in 2023 might be the guy who's the best free agent on the market 2 years ago, Fred VanVleet. Maybe he gets to the unrestricted market. After him, you're going to be looking at, again, realistically, after these extensions get signed, like D'Angelo Russell. Maybe D'Angelo Russell hits unrestricted for a variety of reasons. Although I wouldn't even bet on that. I would bet on him probably signing. The point is that, like, you're saving up your money for nothing. That's all.
That's a great way of putting it. Yes. Save it money for nothing. So that's basically why probably best to continue operating above the salary cap. And then here's another example, right? If you exchange Julius Randle for a player who's going to be under contract, I said it's a non-expiring salary, but again, let's say it's an expiring salary and they just extend the player. I gave it a blanket amount of $25 million. You're still now working with a situation. Even if you remove Derrick Rose and Alec Burks from the equation, you can operate above the salary cap. But you'd still want those players and their money, because if you're going to be above the salary cap without them, you might as well still have them on the books so you have more salary to play with. So it just goes to show that that's why it's the best way to go about it.
Yes, I would. Oh, wait, hold on. You don't have Nerlens Noel on here. Okay, good. Because that's right. Because Nerlens Noel he's already gone.
But
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, you could say.
I was just going to say,
but yes, even still, if you keep Nerlens Noel and have him there and he's not being traded, or let's say he's not dumped to another team, as in the Knicks create a traded player exception they don't even use, like they still have the money at their disposal to play with, and that's good.
I would just say among the things I'm not betting on is the Knicks picking up Nerlens Noel's 30-year option. I'm not betting on Nerlens Noel being here, but
yes. that's the other factor. Yeah.
Yes.
So I wanted to run through really 29 teams, but I listed them as 30 because I wasn't going to white out the Knicks, but bad
job by you.
I know, right? But let's just quickly run through each of them and talk about Julius Randle. I don't want to do a deep dive.
I love this,
but just very quickly,
very briefly
through it. Yes. Right. So like Miami Heat, it's not happening. The Heat and Pat Riley's not making a trade with the Knicks. Like the day that happens, the day I win the lottery, and I'm not winning the lottery. The Celtics, they seem to be doing just fine. They don't need Julius Randle. The Bucks, same thing. The 76ers, people are going to be like Tobias Harris. But if I'm the 76ers, what I really need is a guy who can be more off ball, but do a little creation, a lot of catch and shoot. Does that sound like Julius Randle to you?
And also, if you're the Knicks, the Knicks don't want Tobias Harris at his contract.
Probably true as well.
And that's not. They're not doing Tobias Harris, and I don't even know what I think. And the Sixers are picking cupboard on top of that. Yeah. So no.
Toronto Raptors, it just doesn't really fit what they like, which is lengthy boys.
Not with a 10-foot pole with Masai Ujiri. Maybe if he had some really crappy salary on his books, but he doesn't.
Maybe. The Bulls, I mean, it'd have to be a 3-team deal, and you're sending out Vucevic, but they wouldn't have a center that they'd really like, and because the Knicks aren't going to want Vucevic based on his play style and how they play their own centers. So
can I just say I don't think we don't have to spend any time on it. I don't think this one is insane, and you would have to cobble together a lot of their money, and you'd have to almost certainly, unless I've missed something, send out Alex Caruso, who the Bulls clearly like very much and don't want to send out. But I don't know. I wouldn't. Is there a category of teams where it's like between 0 and like 3% chance of like maybe kick the tires on Julius Randle this summer? Can I put the Bulls in there?
I mean, sure. Again, Vucevic wouldn't be coming to the Knicks because they are very keen on non-spacing fives.
No, yes, I agree with that.
How Vucevic is 31 years old, and he's going to be a 2023 free agent who you could extend, but then why necessarily would you? They could also sub in Kobe White because I don't think his future is going to be there instead of Caruso, math-wise, to make it work, stuff like that. But regardless, I think Chicago, it's just not really going to work anyway. So.
That's fair. We can move on.
Nets, no, it's not going to happen. I know we talked about, or you talked, I'm not going to say you talked about it. I refuse. I'm not even going to entertain it. Not going to happen. The Hawks. Man. Thank you. The Hawks, they've got John Collins. I think it very much works with him. Ironically, though, they did really well when John Collins wasn't playing towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
So just something to think about, but I don't see why Julius would necessarily be a fit for them just based on everything. But
I'm also
sure if we want to put him in like 0 to 3%, or maybe Collins goes to a team that needs a 4 and Randle goes there, and then the Knicks get something back. Like we could put it at like maybe 1%, but even then it's like that feels too high.
Yeah, and I'm also speaking of guys who you don't know really what their value is around the league. Like I'm not sure who's dying to pay John Collins $25 million a year for the next 4 years, right? He's 4 more years left on the deal because he's signed as a restricted free agent this last summer, when he doesn't have Trae Young attached to him to throw him really, really nice passes. And you still get the John Collins defensive issues and other kind of positional quirky issues. So yeah, I don't know. It would maybe a 3-team deal, but we could probably move on from Atlanta.
Well, just very quickly, it'd be a team like the Spurs, which showed interest in John Collins when he was a restricted free agent. That's
true.
Part of why it took him a long time, I believe, to sign. There was interest, and you never know. But yes, let's move on. The Cavs, they certainly don't need it when they have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen in the front court. And even if they moved Allen and tried to get some wing or point guard, like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Julius to be there. So we can cross them off. The Hornets. Yeah, we could talk about the Hornets, right? But again, I talked about their tax situation and how that could be a factor. Like if you're exchanging Gordon Hayward for Julius Randle, you're not saving a lot of money if you're Charlotte. And what's more, you've got Miles Bridges and PJ Washington, 2 young players who fit LaMelo Ball's timeline much more than Julius Randle does, where it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
I agree with everything you just said, which was all very well thought out and rational and logical. This is also a team that just did the thing that one NBA team does every year, which is like, why did they fire that coach? And who knows, there's stuff that going on behind the scenes always, maybe we may not know about, but like, they may not be the most rational of actors. So that's why, again, I would put an asterisk next to Charlotte.
All right, fair. We don't have to talk about the Knicks because we're already doing that. The Wizards, it's funny. The Wizards are like that team where a couple years ago when it was like, oh my God, pair Julius Randle with Kristaps Porzingis. Like in theory, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think Julius actually needs a 5 who can space the floor a little bit more in order to kind of be unlocked a bit.
I agree.
But like, if you're the Wizards, why are you trading Kyle Kuzma for Julius Randle? Like Kuzma he had a better season. He just did.
You're desperate.
Right. But even still, like, wouldn't your priorities, if you're still keeping Bradley Beal, be to kind of like get a larger guard who can maybe mask some of Beal's flaws? Because Bradley Beal went on the Wizards post game and crew and it was like, this is what we need. He basically talked about a larger player who can handle and defend and do more. But like, that's not Julius Randle. Maybe they could function as more positionless, but it didn't seem like that's really what Beal had in mind. And I don't blame him. If I'm the Wizards, I would just rather roll with what I have and try to upgrade at the point guard position than find a high usage 4 who can sometimes handle the ball, but isn't anywhere near a point guard.
I was about to say, they, to me, make more sense as a Brogdon destination than a Julius Randle one.
Yes. I held back on saying it, but because I was going to talk about the next team, but yes, 100%.
Oh yeah. We got Brogdon here. Yeah, no, but it just, if there was enough salary to cobble together where they could get Brogdon and Julius, but unfortunately they do not have that kind of disposable income handy. So no.
Very true. And again, with the Pacers, like, we know the connection with him and Miles Turner. We know that they really don't have an active 4 in the lineup. We know that there's Malcolm Brogdon, who they seem to want to get rid of. Like, they seem like on paper a fit if that's the direction that they would want to go to. The Pistons, they're kind of fascinating to me. So again, like the Pistons, it seems like the whole Jeremy Grant thing with Portland is an avenue they want to approach. If the Pistons trade Jeremy Grant to Portland on draft night, that Grant can squeeze through the traded player exception. If they don't, and they wanted to use a trade player exception later on Jeremy Grant. It wouldn't fit because in the new year, his contract would be too large to be absorbed. That said, if they wanted to open up cap space and they traded Jeremy Grant, and then they thought like, how can we use this cap space to maybe upgrade the roster or at least like get something better than we would in free agency? Julius Randle is surprisingly an option. I don't think he's the number one go-to, but it's the thought process of like, look at the free agency that's out there. It's really slim. It's like Zach LaVine, who's probably going to sign a 5-year contract. And then after that, I don't really know who's there. And then you look at the trade market. How many guys are going to be on the block who are better than Julius Randle? Might be a handful, might be several. It depends who's going to be traded. But it's the thought process then of like, if there aren't a ton of guys who are going to be moved and Julius Randle's available, then there's logic for a team, whether they have cap space or just need an upgrade somewhere, shuffle the chairs, the deck chairs of the Titanic, I guess, whatever you want to call it. Like that is a prevailing thought, at least.
I would be surprised if they went in that direction. They also, as you've talked about on here, did just trade for Marvin Bagley. Who is he a 4? Is he a 5? I don't know. It's only 4 years into his career. We don't.
Yeah, ridiculous. So I think they are using him more as a 5 last time I checked.
Yeah, they have. So like, yes, those two guys could theoretically coexist. I don't know. Maybe they make a swing for the fences win now. Well, that wouldn't be a swing for the fence. The bigger question I have with Detroit is what are they sending back? Because like, I don't know, the Knicks want like Killian Hayes or something. That's the more confusing part for me. And I would be surprised if Detroit parted with any draft equity that was any good. But
that's the thing about Detroit, because they have cap space. They don't have to send anything back except for like a heavily protected pick that never will convey, right? Like they could take a 2nd round pick that they know will never, ever go to.
In which
Knicks.
Case, why are you doing that if you're the Knicks?
Because then you're basically, again, like I was talking about earlier, you're creating a traded player exception that you could either acquire a player into or just turn it into cap space and sign a player that you would want to go that way. So that's basically the angle for why you do it. Yeah. And then another team, the bottom 3 teams in the East all project to have cap space. The Orlando Magic, like they're probably going to have Jonathan Isaac back, although who honestly knows if they're going to have Jonathan Isaac back. They have Wendell Carter Jr., excuse me. He's been great at the 4. They don't seem like
I don't see a fit here at all.
Yeah. So that was the East, right? Now here's the West. The Suns. No. The Grizzlies. No. The Warriors. No. The Mavs. Fascinating situation. Obviously, Julius Randle is from Dallas. Who knows what what they'll be doing with this playoff series that they have with the team below, which is Utah. But I could see a world in which maybe the Mavs look to upgrade their roster and also look to get someone at the 5 too, right? Like if there was a way they could send out money for Julius Randle and for a Miles Turner-like player, like they have the means to do it. It's more just like, is that the approach that they want to take? I really don't know. I'm not sure.
No, we don't know.
But it's a lot of moving pieces, but it's just something to consider. Similar with the Jazz, they're just such an odd situation. Obviously, the goal with Julius Randle, or at least one of the goals to be considered, is trading Julius with other assets, or with assets, again, however you want to categorize Julius Randle, and then kind of taking that next step up for a player like Donovan Mitchell. Is that something that Utah wants to do? Probably not. But it's also like the thought of like, are they going to blow it up? How many teams are going to be interested in Donovan Mitchell? How many teams are willing to reach a certain point for salary and all of that? Who knows? But just a prevailing thought as the Knicks look to do it. And I just want to be clear, a big reason why I have teams listed and not like, here are trades that work, because it's much more about like a lot of things happen in the offseason that you wouldn't be able to predict. And there are a lot of moving pieces. And so instead of like going through, at least personally, I know you're doing this newsletter, so I also didn't want to step on your toes, but like, as we think about this, it's sort of this one thing could work, and then this opens the door for this thing, which then opens the door for that thing. And it's so kinetic that things you wouldn't necessarily expect become open. So I feel like by looking at the teams and then one other piece of the puzzle that we'll do afterwards, it gives us maybe more insight as to where teams are situated and how they might want to go about this.
And I think that's a great way to put it, because you have to look at a team is not, I think a team that is feeling good about where it's at for the most part is not going to make a play for a Julius Randle because, as we've discussed already, the Knicks are going to want something back of value for him, putting aside the few cap space teams that maybe they just get the traded player exception, and that's that. And so a lot of the teams that we have gone through, like, these are not teams in apparent distress, I guess would be the way to put it. Like, who are the teams that you can say are in apparent distress? Atlanta is like, maybe they're close to that. And like, are they a team that's just like, we just got to shake things up, right? But again, we talked about probably not a good fit one-on-one, maybe a 3-team deal somewhere like that. Okay. Washington, that's why I didn't want to let Washington go so easily, because again, are they feeling desperate to try to convince Bradley Beal to sign long-term? Like, they're a team to look at. And the reason I'm thinking about this is because you just mentioned the Jazz. So if there is one team that we almost know, you know what, crazy things have happened. Maybe they win this series. Maybe they go on a run. The way things are appearing now, they're going to want to blow this thing up. And what does blow it up look like? Everybody seems to think that means they're going to try to move Gobert. We don't have to have should the Knicks be in on Rudy Gobert discussion right now? We could do that at a later time. But like, you're right. This is a team you look at and you're like, okay, they're going to shake the tree. What shakes loose, and how can the Knicks potentially get in on it?
Exactly. Moving on to the Nuggets, similar. Just don't see a fit. I know Aaron Gordon's has had better experiences than he has this postseason. Just do not see it. Same could be said of the Timberwolves. The Pelicans too. Like, it's even if we talk about Zion and Randle and, like the prevailing thought of Randle and a pick and Zion and salary filler. Number one, the Pelicans don't really have that salary filler that they would want. Number two, I don't know why they would do that unless it's like, the bridge is so burned that they can't do anything. And number three, we're then in the Pelicans financial situation of they're going to be in the tax, something they've never paid. And are they really going to be willing to do that by throwing Julius Randle into the fire? I do not see it.
I will just say, if you're interested in a potential fake trade involving Julius Randle ending up in New Orleans and a certain oversized power forward ending up in New York, check out Monday's newsletter, because I have some additional thoughts on that. I agree. It is not likely. And some things would need to transpire for it to be a thing that is actually discussed. And the money part does play in, because the Pelicans don't have like that perfect, easily movable salary that they actually want to move. So it would need to be a compilation of things. And I'll just say this. I don't think it works as a 1-for-1 trade. I think it would need to be a little bit more complicated with getting a third team involved. I'll just leave it at that.
Exactly. The Clippers, I just don't really see a fit there. You have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Are you bringing Julius Randle off the bench? Are you playing big? I mean, we know
you don't want a Marcus Morris centered trade.
Honestly, like, if I can break free from Julius Randle for a second, I know there's a Marcus Morris trade in the rumor mill right now going on. A thought that I had was, I look at a Clippers team that has way too many bigs and a lot of wings and basically no point guards. And I look at Marcus Morris and I look at Derrick Rose and I think the money works. They need a point guard. Again, I'm going on to the same thing of like, if Derrick Rose can be shipped to a contender and it also opens up the space for how that works. Like last week we talked about, where's Derrick Rose going to go? And then I saw Marcus Morris. I thought, yeah, like that could work. I'm not even saying bring Marcus Morris to the Knicks. Maybe it's to a third team. Who knows? But like that, at least matching thought process of the money and need and how you figure that out and get Rose to a situation that would be nice for him. It felt like a deal that the framework of a deal that kind of made sense. So, but I digress.
It's not nuts or Rose for Luke Kennard and a very, 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 very future Clippers pick.
But I mean, if you're the Clippers, do you want to give up Luke Kennard when he had a good season for? Like, it just seems to me Kennard's not on the block. Marcus Morris, or at least it doesn't seem like Kennard's on the block and Marcus Morris is.
No,
how do you move out one, the other, and keep the younger player in Kennard, who's 25 years old?
Yeah, he's young. He had a nice year. I think he led the league in 3-point percentage this year.
Believe he did. Yeah, he was blistering. So, anyways,
nice year.
The Spurs have a glaring hole at the 4. They've got plenty of money. The question is, do they want Julius Randle?
Who pick me? I know.
I don't think they do, but crazier things have happened. The next is the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yes.
So again,
LeBron for Julius. Who says no?
Right. Any deal with the Lakers is pretty much going to include Russell Westbrook. As we've talked about, Russell Westbrook would just not be a fit in New York for a plethora of reasons. You'd have to make it a 3-team deal. I know that's also then where it's like the Gordon Hayward thing, and it does help Charlotte, but it also, like from a financial standpoint, but it doesn't make them a deeper team. It's purely a money-saving move for 2023, not a money-saving move and a way to like make the roster deeper. So that type of deal just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's one of those deals where it's also like Randall and LeBron have so much overlap that I don't know why LA would be as interested when what they should probably be doing is focusing more on perimeter shooting and perimeter defense and a point guard.
And we should at least say that there are a lot of people out there who think that the Lakers might entertain Anthony Davis for Julius Randle and stuff.
Are a lot of people just Bill Simmons and clones of Bill Simmons?
I don't. How is that helping LeBron James win a championship right now? And if you're not helping LeBron James win a championship right now, if you're the Lakers, how are you helping yourselves? That would be like, I don't even know what that. I mean, that would be a we're gonna begin the stages of like a tank. This is the early. I don't even know what that would be. I don't see it.
The Kings again, like we're talking about Harrison Barnes, but why are they pairing Randle and Sabonis together when Sabonis has pretty much been playing the 5 and they could use more spacing at the 4? In fact, Barnes makes a lot more sense for the Kings as constructed as Randle does, and they're not going to move Sabonis because they just acquired him.
Yeah, that ship sailed.
Then it's the Trailblazers, and again, there's nothing stopping them from acquiring Jeremy Grant and acquiring Julius Randle. Of course, the acquisition of Julius Randle would mean Eric Bledsoe, and he falls into that category of expiring salary that isn't good. You don't want to extend him, which means you'd have to flip him again because you want to be an above the cap team in 2023. So the draft compensation that Portland would even give, I don't quite know how that would even be beneficial because their first round pick is protected for forever unless they're doing something in this year's draft where it's a pick swap, or after the draft takes place, they trade out. But then if you're Portland, why are you trading your first round pick out for Julius Randle? You're not doing that. So it's one of those moves that like, hey, it's great in theory, we should do it, but doesn't work. And the one thing before I turn it over to you, as we mentioned before, Eric Bledsoe's contract, it's partially guaranteed. If he's traded, it's not like the Knicks can just, cut the salary and only do the guaranteed amount. It would be the full amount. They would, by waiving him, it would be the entire, I think like $19+ million salary. It just makes no sense. It's not something that Brock Aller would want. It's not something I want. And honestly, it's not something that you should want either.
So the pick protection thing with Portland is a significant issue because again, that they owe a pick already to Chicago, and the language in how and when that would convey could potentially get a little dicey, which makes the pick that they would acquire from Portland potentially less valuable when they would then go to try to flip that pick somewhere else. Because again, teams like to know what they're getting. They like to know that the pick is going to convey like on this year or in this set of years or something like that. The Portland pick from this year is interesting to me. If they get in the top 4, they're obviously not. I mean, maybe they trade it, but they're not trading for Julius Randle. If they get something that is more in line with their draft slot, something like 6, 7, something in that range, that's a little interesting to me, especially if the Knicks end up at 11 or 12 and there's a player that the Knicks have their eye on, and you do a pick swap and then a swap of Randle for Bledsoe. I still don't think the Knicks would do that. I'm not sure if Portland would do that. I think actually Portland probably would do that, but I don't know. It's interesting to me, at least. Yeah. It's something that I would not dismiss completely.
Sure. It's again why you'd have to flip Bledsoe. That's the bottom line. You got to do it.
Yeah.
If that's the return. The Thunder, again, just from a pure fit and what we know about the Thunder, it seems like they have little intention of competing this year for the third year in a row. They do have a traded player exception that's $20 or $21 million. That basically it's a use it or lose it. They either use it by the draft night or I guess the start of free agency, and then they used it, or they go into the new year, the SGA contract kicks in and it's gone. So it's not big enough to acquire Julius's salary. You know, could they renounce it and then do something? Maybe. Like I'd have to honestly look back at their finances to see if they could do that. The prevailing thought would be that they do it and then flip Julius for another player to go elsewhere, so they could kind of get assets in two different places. But again, like you may have to dump Julius to OKC, because from their vantage point, again, if this deal even does work with the trade player being waived and everything, because from their vantage point, it's we're taking on the risk of acquiring Julius Randle and then shipping him out and then taking on other salary. So that's just something they may not want to do.
The Knicks are not going to do this with Julius Randle, but just that if they were that desperate to get him off the books, the notion of trading him into the Thunder's cap space, and they're the only team that obviously has cap space between now and the new league year, if they renounce that traded player exception. And then with the Oklahoma City Thunder's thinking being like, yeah, we'll rehab his value and then we'll flip him for something better, like they've done many times in the past. I don't think the Knicks would do that, but worth mentioning.
Yeah. And then lastly, the Houston Rockets, just no. Like, we're not going to talk about John Wall. Actually, we probably will in a moment, but just no, it's not going to work. It's not what they want.
He is from, listen, he's from Dallas, he's from the state of Texas.
Yeah, sure. But it does nothing for the
Christian
Knicks.
Wood exists. He's interesting.
He does. But all right. Well, so let's segue into something else.
Let's segue.
So
yes.
we're going to look at contracts, right? Specifically from expiring in 2023 through 2025. Not included in this are players with player options, right? So your Giannis Antetokounmpos, your Jason Tatums, your Donovan Mitchells of the world are not going to be mentioned here. Just keep that in mind. And then, of course, there's some unrestricted free agents in 2026 that would be, I'm going to say headlining as of right now. John Collins, Terry Rozier, Norman Powell, not the best class. And then this list is also basically $15 million salaries and up. So there could be smaller salaries that add up to getting Randle, but I just felt it was safer to look at the baseline of $15 million and up.
I think that's smart.
Yeah. So again, let's go back to the good matching expiring salary just very quickly. The reason is the Knicks would have to give this player an extension just so they can facilitate them in a trade. You ignore the sign and trade option. That player is eligible for up to 120% of the previous year's base salary. What does that mean? So last year, 2021-22, I guess, Julius Randle made $19.8 million. If you take that and multiply it by 120%, it's $26.136 million. Even when including bonuses, that is the absolute most that the Knicks could have given Julius Randle in the contract they gave him. And they did that. The only thing is the bonuses didn't compute, so it doesn't matter. But that's the max for what they would do. Take that and apply it for whatever salary they'd hypothetically get. Cool. 2023 UFAs. We can fly through these, right, John?
Sure.
LeBron James.
These are players that are going to hit the unrestricted market, not this summer, but a year from now.
Correct.
As of right now. And the key thing is these players, many of them can and will be signing extensions before they ever hit the open market. So with that,
do we think LeBron James is moving anywhere?
No.
James Harden.
Andrew wants to say something. James, no.
Yeah, I think the deal with the devil has been made in Philly. John Wall.
Please move on.
Right. Again, you're not going to extend him. Same thing with Russell Westbrook. Bradley Beal. If he opts in and tries to command a trade, it's not going to be in New York. We can rule out Kyrie Irving just because. Kevin Love, it's not. I just don't see it happening. He has been great in the role he's been.
Doesn't make any sense.
Andrew Wiggins doesn't make sense in Golden State. Is Golden State going to trade him in 3-team deals? Again, that's why it's tricky. I don't really see it. We can cross off Jokic. We can cross off D'Lo. Al Horford, the Celtics are either going to guarantee his contract and keep him or non-guarantee his contract. He walks away with like $15 million and then they re-sign him and then all's great.
Yeah.
Vucevic, again, I don't really see Chicago doing it from that perspective. Barnes.
We talked about Barnes.
Deal, but we talked about him. Gallinari, he's on a partial guarantee. Maybe the Hawks move him. Maybe they just decline his salary and then he walks away. But you're also not going to want to extend his salary because it's just not good salary.
Yeah.
Talked about Jeremy Grant. We talked about Miles Turner in terms of, well, I guess not necessarily like the idea.
Yeah, we didn't talk about him as an incoming piece to the Knicks, which is a little bit slightly interesting, but I think we can just rule it out. I don't see Indiana being like, let's go get Julius Randle, and that's what we're going to use Miles Turner to go get is Julius Randle. It just doesn't make sense.
If anything, it's let's keep Miles Turner and get Julius Randle if that's the direction they even want to go. Or
let's trade Miles Turner to the Knicks and try to get something good from the Knicks.
Yeah, but even still, I don't think the Knicks go that route. But we'll have that conversation another time. Bojan Bogdanovic. I mean, not exactly the player that we would have in mind in terms of Utah.
No, I don't see that one either.
Talked about Bledsoe. Karis LeVert. The Knicks were interested. We know that they targeted him with Evan Fournier and a first-round pick, the Mavs pick. They came up short. I'm glad they came up short.
I'm very happy they came up short.
It's also probably the best argument against what we talked about last week, which is our surprise if Evans moved, where clearly they're going to canvass the league, but he's also in a different place than he was when the Knicks were looking to acquire Karis LeVert. He's acclimated more. And then Steven Adams, who doesn't
make sense for the Knicks. We can move on.
Right. So this is 2023. We're done. That's it. It's over. So now
no other free agents or no other impending free agents that make above $15 million.
Exactly. In 2023.